Welcome. I'm so glad that you're here and joining me today for my very first episode for my new podcast, Airtime with Agnes Kru Yoga. A podcast to inspire your yoga and your teaching as a yoga teacher, as I believe that both goes along. I also truly believe that the profession of a yoga teacher is one of the most beautiful ones, and I would almost say also a very important one in the world, if done professionally and really from your heart, taught from your heart and from the heart of yoga, spirit of yoga. And I really hope with all what I'm doing here that I can contribute to this. So I am Agnes Kru. I live in Mallorca now for 11 years and teach here almost for 10 years full time. But this podcast is not about me. It's about my guests. But before I introduce you to the very first one today, I would also make sure that you are with us and you can comment, you can ask questions. I'm not sure, but I believe so that for privacy, politics, and protections, we won't see your name if you comment something. So please make sure that into your comments that you also write your name. So my very first guest today is David Holzer, a professional writer, and he doesn't know, but my favorite conversation buddy. I really like his British humor and intelligent humor. And I met him almost 10 years ago when he used to live here on Mallorca in my yoga classes. And the studio I was teaching and still teach. And he became really a dedicated yoga and combines his passions of writing and yoga, and wrote a lot of articles for LA Yoga, Yoga International, magazine, and wrote also a book or contributed to a book of Embodied Resilience. And as the founder of Yoga for Writers, he created an online course for the secret writing mantra. So let's please welcome, drumroll, David Holzer. Yay!
Nice to be here.
Thank you so much for being here, and you were very spontaneous when I asked you, and you said right away yes. So thank you for that. And so please say something about yourself. Introduce yourself, David.
Well, I think you've pretty much covered it, but what I would say is that when I fell in love with yoga around the time I met you and first started having classes with you 10 years ago, I discovered that yoga had a really fascinating effect on my writing. And so from then on, what I wanted to do was not simply practice to get fit and flexible and all those kind of things, but to use yoga as a way of exploring what the practice did to my inner landscape, to my consciousness, and how it affected the kind of craft and discipline of writing. And that's, the two have gone hand in hand for the past 10 years for me, and continue to do so, and have inspired me to, as you say, to write about yoga and writing and creativity, but also to teach yoga for writers on my DailyOm course, which over 300 people have taken. And just spread the word really about yoga for writers and the benefits to people who, in some instances, are skeptical. Excuse me. I've got a slight fog in my throat. But really, anybody, I've demonstrated some of the principles to the most cynical of writers, and because it's really about breath, it inevitably makes people feel better. So that's yoga for writers, really.
Cool. There are actually comments coming in from Peter Peter, do you remember Peter from Calanova, from the yoga at the beach? He says hi also to David.
Oh, right.
Hi,
Nice.
Peter. Nice to have you with us.
Lovely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I invited you today as I was hoping that you can give us some insights, having interviewed so many big names in the yoga world, and to have a little bit of insights outside my own or our own little yoga bubble here in Mallorca. Do you see any tendencies pre and post pandemic? That we can't really say that we're post now, but do you see any tendencies? Let's start there.
Well, I think that what I was noticing was the way in which yoga was becoming not less pure, but becoming part of an exercise routine, if you like, for people who didn't necessarily share, say, your and my interest in yoga philosophy and our belief in the whole package of yoga, but who were doing yoga as something they would do maybe 2 or 3 times a month alongside running, whatever it might be. So it was a shift away from what you might call pure yoga to yoga as part of a regime. But also, of course, the whole business with Me Too, with white privilege, with the schism between yogis who promoted anti-vaxxing and promoted a non-scientific approach to health, which is obviously problematic for yoga because there isn't a lot of scientific basis for the traditional yogic understanding of the body yet. You know, although there are
the supple body, yes, but not.
Yeah. It's more of a kind of metaphorical approach to the body. So there was this schism between people who wanted a much more scientific approach, and people who wanted to use ancient yogic understanding of the body to justify a non-scientific approach or a non-Western scientific approach. And of course, the two are coming together. But it's reckless to me to just assume that you can live by, the yogic understanding of how the body works if it's not proven by Western science. So two different strands, really. One may be more into ancient yogic principles, and one away from that, seeing yoga, as I say, as purely an element in a contemporary fitness regime.
What we've seen already before pandemic. As I have recently launched an online course for yoga teachers about adjustments. I am a big fan of adjustments. And do you see any change regarding adjustments now, the perception of adjustments?
Well, sure. I mean, obviously, Me Too, and the scandals involving male teachers in contemporary yoga but also going back to Patabi Joyce, people coming out with stories about Patabi Joyce, about Mr. Iyengar, and I think what you'd safely call abuse of female students. And so, people not being so comfortable with adjustments, or there being much more caution around the use of adjustments. And of course,
because of Me Too, and now the COVID hit as well. So there's another reason not to.
And then also the rise in online yoga, where adjustments can only, by definition, be verbal, which means that perhaps there are generations of people, or not generations, perhaps there's a new wave of students who will be coming to yoga studios who got their start in online yoga and may not be aware of the significance of adjustments.
Do you see a cultural difference between, let's say, the States and Spain? You used to live in Spain, about adjustments, regarding adjustments.
Well, I noticed that I mean, Spanish people are more tactile anyway.
Yes, they are.
You know, and I think I was in my, because I'm here in Mallorca now, I think I was in my bank the other day, or in an office or something like that. And I noticed a guy quite cheerfully put his arm around his female colleague. And I thought, in any other part of the world, you know, in America and perhaps in Britain, he might have had to ask permission to do that. Whereas here, it was just completely normal, which I think is lovely, personally. But yeah, I mean, America has become increasingly a permission culture, where you have to ask permission to do just about anything.
Everything. Yeah, definitely. I'm not sure if I should share this story, but I thought it's really funny. When I recorded my online course in the middle of Mallorca, in a tiny village, Binissalem, where there's an amazing location. And the guy who was helping me with the sound technician, just literally arrived. He immigrated from the States, from LA to Binissalem, from LA to little tiny Binissalem. I think he was in a cultural shock still. And it was so different how he worked. Like for me as a European, or for me as a European living in Spain, where everybody is kissing each other and hugging each other and touching. They're so close, as you say. And he just wanted to clip in a microphone into my leggings for the sound. And it was all about like, okay, can you please pull your leggings away from your body so I can clip the microphone into your leggings? Okay, I will let go now. Can you please take this cable beneath your t-shirt, because I need the cable of the microphone coming through. And now, yes, please help. Can you please pull the t-shirt away, because I will this. Now I will put it here. I come now closer. And it was like, it took like half an hour to just clip in this microphone. And at one point I just said, please touch me. No, so there's definitely, it's nothing wrong. There's no right or wrong, but it's just very different. No, very different, the approach. And I think very important also for us teachers, you know, especially some teachers are traveling also around the world and teaching in different places, to be aware of that. No,
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, you know, we're adults and we've been around a bit and we're European. But for really young people coming into yoga, it is very useful, I think, to understand, you know, that I think we've all had experiences where somebody's adjusted us quite forcefully, men and women. And looking back on it, you know, you're in butterfly position or something like that, and somebody stands on your thighs, both of them. We've all had that kind of experience.
Yeah, they used to do that. That's very coming from Ashtanga, no? Where back then with Patavi Joys, they were standing on each other, but they don't do it I think the Ashtangis, they don't do that anymore.
No, quite rightly, but I mean, coming into yoga, if that was still the norm, and you were assuming, okay, well, it goes with the territory, and it can be very dangerous. And as a big guy, you know, people have leant on me and pulled me and things like that, and you know, it's never bothered me really, but it's quite an assumption to make that I'm going to accept that and also be physically strong enough to
Yeah, I really believe that you as a teacher, whatever you're doing, like adjustments, you have to know what you're doing, and you have to know if it's okay for the person in front of you. No, you need that sense of connection. What is your personal opinion about adjustments? You, as a man, saying about yourself not being in a typical yoga body. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I always had like I say, as long as they weren't too extreme, and very rarely were they, because I've not done a vast amount of Ashtanga. I always welcomed them. I felt that, and I still do, I felt that they were the teacher sharing their knowledge with me, really. And I felt that they were also an extension of the idea of a relationship between a teacher and a student, and a connection. So I never.
You create definitely a connection. You create definitely a relation, no, and hopefully a good one. Hopefully good one.
And don't forget, an adjustment can be not simply in the asana, but in shavasana. And some teachers like to go around and adjust your neck and pull your neck and lengthen your body and things like this, and put a bit of essential oil on your forehead and stuff like that. Well, those are adjustments in one sense.
Yeah.
And they're very nice. So I've never had a problem with it, but I can understand a woman and a male teacher, that it can overstep the mark sometimes, I'm sure. And there is with male teachers and female students, there is the and we've seen it so much in recent years.
Yeah.
The temptation to abuse power, which puts back onto the male teacher that they basically need to have integrity.
Also, as a woman, when I have male students, I adjust different. The mindset is very important,
Yeah.
And as you say, like for me, adjustments, it's like a metaphor, like how you connect and how you are with your students. It's not necessarily just about physically correcting a person and putting them into a pose you think is correct. No, but I thought it's actually interesting what you were saying, and calling yourself not being in a typical yoga body as like the most common known yoga book I am studying with, or used to study with, and all teachers, I think, from Mr. BKS Iyengar himself. No, not in fancy yoga pants. And so this is the typical yoga body, like a huge chest, torso, very big, So maybe like teachers seeing you, they also assume that your pranayama is just very intense and very advanced.
Maybe that would be nice.
Yeah.
That'd be nice.
I actually also saw today this, so that we were talking before about, let's see, those kind of adjustments, but Iyengar flying, doing himself a arm balance. Do you see that on the forward fold person? So I think those times are over, no?
Yeah, and they also were connected to the notion of, which was part of ancient yoga in India, of kind of almost contortionism, and the fakirs and the sadhus and so on. And I've interviewed quite a few, 2 or 3 well-known yogis, yoga personalities. And a couple of them have said, the number of people that have had to have, hip replacements and have done permanent damage to parts of their body by doing precisely those kind of things that Mr. Iyengar is doing right there, and I think a lot of us have done that. We've contorted ourselves into positions that we weren't really capable of going into, and we've done ourselves an injury. And that's again where adjustments are very, very important. That not simply pushing you forward, but bringing you back, to not overextend, especially with standing positions and your knees and things like that. It's incredibly important, I think.
Yeah. And so you mentioned also that the online yoga. You've interviewed also the big names in online yoga, and this changes so much. As I said before, for me, adjustments, for example, it's like a metaphor. It's not about just that I physically correct someone into a pose, but it's about the connection, like to be and to guide the students. Now, if I'm at the top of my mat and I teach, I don't know what at the last row, how the student is breathing. if I don't step up. No? So how are the thoughts of how do they perceive the online teachers who teach classes online? How do they think about adjustments or about that theme, about it?
Well, the people I've spoken to, who teach live online classes, 2 or 3 people have just expressed frustration that they can't adjust, because they see it as an important part of it. One of my teacher in Hungary, where I spend sort of quite a lot of my time, who was teaching me one-on-one, found it quite difficult in the beginning because she moved online to actually be able to help me. And I think when, I had some online classes with you, didn't I? And
Yes.
It was difficult. It came down to, excuse me, how do we even position our laptops?
So, you had a problem with that.
Yeah, exactly, because I'm big
David, I don't see you. David, I don't see you.
Yeah,
exactly. David, where are you?
And that's not even adjustments, and that's not even knowing whether the pose is actually correct or not. It's actually, can I even see these people? And then when
I took once a class. It was amazing. I took once an online class with more than 200 people in a live class, an Iyengar class. And this was incredible. The teacher was literally with everyone. He really saw everyone. It's impressive with over 200 people. You can't even do it in a normal classroom. But in Iyengar, for those who don't know this style so much, is like you really stay and work in a pose like for 15 minutes or 10 minutes. No? So there is time to talk and make sure and say the same thing again and again and again, and to check through the screen and to check what everybody's doing, and using the chat box to make sure, Maria, do this, Anna, do this. So it is possible. But those you were interviewing, the big names are really living from online. No, they record the classes, and then they even don't see, there's no live online, so that it's not possible. No?
And their videos are professionally shot, and they work out where they're going to be. They as much as possible, they zoom in on areas, on aspects of the asana that are really important. But of course, what they're offering is not very in depth anyway, and they would be the first people to say it's not in depth. It's 15 minutes of yoga before work, or yoga before sleep, or yoga before running, or
so
whatever.
It's more the physical benefit of yoga. It's about the physical
and I think that Iyengar's different, isn't it? And I suppose to a degree Ashtanga's slightly different. But when you're when you're doing vinyasa online, and it's kind of true of vinyasa in a studio, it's so fast that sorry, that's the delights of summer in Spain. Not
sounds in Spain.
Yeah. That even with vinyasa classes, there's one of the dangers is you're moving so fast that you're not really doing the asana exactly how you should do.
Yeah. What are your personal thoughts on online yoga?
Well, I mean, for me, I have an online yoga course, and I have a 15-minute sequence that I demonstrate, or is demonstrated by a yogi friend of mine in the course, and some poses that we go into in a more in-depth way. And I think online yoga can be really beneficial. And I think choosing the right online yoga classes are great to help you develop a self-practice.
Yes, definitely what happened now last year, that everybody suddenly has a self-practice. That's the positive part, no? It's amazing. Everybody has blocks at home. Everybody has mats at home. They were forced to find a little space at home where they can meditate or move. So this is amazing. No? It's started to become normal to do it at home. Whilst before, everybody was like addicted or was, they had to go to class. They had to go to a studio. No? So this is a positive change. No?
Yeah, I mean, to me, studios will always be much more powerful. Practicing with other people is much, much more powerful. But then, you know, when I was going to the studio, I would go 3, maybe 4 at the most times a week and not do yoga on the other days. Whereas if you want a daily practice that is perhaps less intense, where you just do 20 odd minutes every day, and you experiment, you know, I mean, I do some, you know, sometimes I'll do something that's influenced by Kundalini, something that's more vinyasa, you know, something that is yin, you know, and you can experiment. And I think you also can do it, say, for example, with Kundalini, which gets a lot of criticism for the baggage that goes with it, that you can try it without buying into what some people call a pseudo cult, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, so it's interesting times in terms of opening people up to the diversity of yoga.
Yes, definitely. So you have done in so many different places yoga, practice yoga. You have interviewed like really the big studio owners and teachers. And where do you think is the best place to practice yoga?
Well, I'm biased, but I would always say Mallorca. And, you know, I would always say Earth Yoga, to be honest, because although I practice with other studios on the island.
Woo! Could you please confirm that I didn't pay you to say that?
Yeah, exactly. I have taken no money before making that statement. But it's
Thank you.
It's really because, yeah, I practiced in California, I practiced in Scandinavia, I practiced in Germany, I've practiced in the US, I practiced in India, and I've never had teachers who are, I would say, any better than the teachers I had at Earth Yoga, which is one thing.
Oh my God, I have to put now, I want actually money for that promotion. It's not my studio. I write that comment. I comment that in here. It's not my studio, but it's like my home where I grew as a teacher. So yeah, I hope the Mama from Earth Yoga is watching now and is happy to hear that she won. Yeah, nice. Thank you. That's so surprising.
There's also the vibe of it, really, that, you know, it's got it's a lovely studio in terms of how it feels. It's got a nice community feel to it. You know, some studios can be very intimidating, and, you know, have all of the stuff, but be very slick. You know, I've been in a couple of studios in Sweden like that were very, 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 very commercial.
Yeah.
You know.
So if you had $100 million to change the yoga world, what would you do?
I would absolutely find a way to enable people to share yoga with disadvantaged people who can't get to studios, who can't afford designer yoga gear, who can't afford mats or whatever, or simply don't know about yoga and live in environments where, you know, people wouldn't dream of doing yoga. So I think in poorer communities around the world, in where people are incarcerated, where people could really benefit from yoga for their health, but are unaware of it. I don't think the yoga industry, which I was amazed, I read recently, I think something you shared with me, that the yoga industry actually grew in value in 2020.
Yeah, I was surprised.
Which is absolutely amazing. I mean, I don't understand how, unless it was the online boom.
The online.
But yeah, I think you know, the notion of bhakti yoga and karma yoga, we all agree with, and we all do our bit. But I think if there were more schemes, you know, like yoga in prison and the great work done
Yeah,
by
you know, that's one project I'm working for.
Yeah.
Something I really, important.
Well, Mallorca has a prison, you know.
I know.
Those people are as much in need of yoga as anywhere else.
Yeah.
You know, it's the whole principle of taking yoga off the mat, I think, and also the principle of applying yogic principles to things like microfinance in India and empowerment and so on. Anything like that, I think, deserves funding.
Though I think like even the 100 millions are not necessary to change that, right? No, as
It's
like
not-
I mentioned, the $100 million are not necessary to change that, what you just mentioned. No, like to make it more yoga more inclusive and not so exclusive for just so to include people who don't have money. Like you said, the mats. Every yoga studio is sitting on mats. The people just don't stop to come back. They have their private mats in the studios and they don't come back because they change their routine, they change their practice. They prefer to go now to, I don't know, basketball or CrossFit. And so to maybe share those mats with places close, with neighborhoods where they don't have so much money and for example, refugee centers, I don't know, stuff like that.
Well, you used the phrase before, the yoga bubble, and I think a lot of us have been. I mean, I certainly, one of the things I fell in love with yoga was this bubble. Really, was this kind of nice, insensitive, aesthetically pleasing space with people who were nice and kind and friendly in that environment, and non-judgmental, you know. So I think to get out of the yoga bubble mindset isn't easy, you know, because
but necessary.
But necessary for sure.
Yeah.
And I think when we all go into yoga, we're not going into yoga to help anybody else. We're going into yoga in the beginning because we need it.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to move through it. And that's interesting because that's where we only really understand that, I think, when we're exposed to the principles of yoga. Although I do think that something happens to your consciousness when you practice yoga. I do think yoga makes you more empathetic.
Yeah, definitely. I actually, maybe it was the same article you just mentioned. I shared with you an article saying COVID didn't kill the yoga industry. It was already dying before. So what is your opinion about that?
Well, obviously it depends on how you define dying, because we both read the article that said that it was actually booming. And the studio system, if you like, was in trouble because of so many studios being in space, in areas, in cities that are highly desirable, that they were often kind of in bohemian type quarters that became more and more desirable to real estate people. So the cost of rents and leases and things like that must have gone up. The scandals of yoga, the fact that some yoga teachers and yoga celebrities and yoga people we know or know of have said, to my mind, profoundly irresponsible things and supported anti-vaxxing, supported white privilege, you know, supported elitism, which is, I think, I mean, an anecdote that, you know, here in Mallorca, I was talking to somebody a week or so ago who I would never have thought was anti-yoga for a second. But she said, you know, she
anti-yoga.
Anti-yoga. She said she was walking past a yoga class on the beach, something that is perfectly normal to us, on our way home from somewhere. And she said it looked like a cult. you know. And I think perhaps yoga is also reaping the rewards of the smugness that went with yoga for quite some time. You know, that I do yoga and you don't thing. I know something you don't because I do yoga. Which I think there's an aspect of that in it, because the vitriol aimed at yogic anti-vaxxers, who are obviously stupid, but they're no more or less stupid than anybody else in any other sector that makes a comment about anti-vaxxing. But the queuing up to attack them was surprising, and I think the dilution of the spiritual aspect of yoga, that yoga is a way of life that we fell in love with, that I mentioned at the beginning, that, you know, people didn't need to go to a yoga studio with incense and Buddhas and wafty music and so on, because they could just go to the gym where they work out, where they do CrossFit, or where, you know, so why would they need to go to a dedicated yoga space?
Yeah, I think also the article, there was also something positive. If something is dying, then something negative is dying. And as always, a change brings something positive, or can bring something positive. No, so whatever is happening right now, also in the yoga world, may this contribute to something better. No, because I think there is time also for change. Really
and I think that I interviewed, I think it was Matthew Remsky, and I asked him, okay, well, if studios are dying, what's the alternative? And he said, well, maybe we'll go back to the one-to-one transference of yoga knowledge that was how yoga started, you know, pre the 19th century. Yeah. Pre the 19th century in India, there weren't yoga classes. You know, yoga was handed down from yogis to sadhus and so on. And then the student, the practitioner, well, they weren't a student, they were a practitioner. They would go away and they would practice yoga, and it would be part of their own personal enlightenment or way of being. And maybe that's to our advantage if we go back to that, but also if we go back to an emphasis on one-to-one teaching, you know, which I think also online teaching is a great medium for in-depth, intense one-to-one imparting.
I anyhow believe that our teaching as a teacher always should be one-on-one. Doesn't matter if you have even 100 people in front of you. That was I was saying before with this Iyengar class online of more than 200 people, and I felt he knew me. He never saw me, no, but he was really with me. And you, as a teacher, you have really the responsibility just to be personal and just to see everyone. You can also teach one-on-one and just connect. So again, with also all my being ambassador for the adjustments, no, like connect and see and be with your students, no.
Yeah.
So, David, your role is always to interview others. How is it actually for you to be interviewed today?
Well, it's, you know, it's nice. We know each other so well. It's a conversation anyway, so it's very natural. Yeah. Is
there anything you would like to ask me? Though I'm not sure if I really want to ask that. It's quite a dangerous question here live, but okay, it's yours.
Just wondering how your mission with adjustments is going, really.
My mission with adjustments, my being ambassador for adjustments. It's going well, and the mission is not completed yet. So we'll see. So people started to take the courses, and I didn't hear any negative feedback. I don't know if it's good or bad sign, no? If they didn't reply back. But I think there is a lot of misconception from teachers, no, about it. But again, it's, as I said, it's a metaphor. If you step up away from your mat and you come closer to your student and you learn to be personal and do even like a personalized class within a huge class, this is about adjusting, about guiding, it's about assisting. You know? So I'm working on my mission. I believe in that.
No, and I think you're right. I mean, when I think back on it, the teachers that I'm most grateful to were ones that were very tactile. And
So
had
I
that ability.
I have a comment here. Sorry, I have a comment here from Peter. Yoga is no different to any other industry. The pandemic has meant a reassessment of how best to operate. No? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, where I would say it's slightly different is that yoga is rooted, and that's always been problematic for yoga, that it's an industry, but it's rooted in a set of non-commercial principles. So there's always a struggle between a philosophy and a quite justifiable need to make money, you know?
Yeah.
I mean,
but may we use that commercial side to something positive? No, I also
and one of the heartening things is the people I've talked to at the highest level of yoga as an industry, you know, whether they're entrepreneurs, whether they've made fortunes with online yoga, they all argue that they abide by the fundamental principles of yoga, all of them. And of course, in one sense, you'd say, well, they would, wouldn't they? But you know, the only person I've ever met who came out and said, absolutely, yoga's an industry, absolutely.
Me?
Sorry?
Me? I was that?
No. There's a lady called Ava Taylor who runs Yama Talent, who's a very savvy businesswoman, as well as practicing yoga. You know, she was the person who said to me, well, of course, yoga's an industry, and there's nothing wrong with that. Of course, we all want to make money. There's nothing wrong with that. But she also went into yoga because she loved it. Mm-hmm. You know, so at the very highest levels of yoga, there is this tension between the fundamental principles and the fact that, you know, I make money from my course. You know, I want to make money from my course. I invested in my course. I see no reason why I can't make money from my course.
Yeah. Actually, also I say a lot, like I hope also to make money with my courses, because then it's for me also easier to share with those who are not privileged, like we were talking before for yoga in prison, no, and those things. So I can give also. No, it's like a sharing, just to start to contribute, to share it with others. No?
Yeah, and there's also nothing wrong with the fact that you've invested time in training. You intend to give really good value for money. Well, then you should be paid, you know, and you should be paid a reasonable amount. And
so you mentioned your online course now. Tell us a little bit about the secret writing mantra, it's called.
It's 8 classes that focus on I'd say it's for yogis who want to write and writers who want to do yoga. And it's all about preparing your consciousness and body to write. So there's a straightforward 15-minute sequence that anybody of pretty much any level of yoga can do, with alternative suggestions if you can't do it. There are simple writing exercises that focus on overcoming what sometimes are the blocks with regard to writing, you know, which are really all, in my opinion, to do with anxiety, and can be overcome with breath. But then also enabling you to have the discipline to sit down and write for not huge amounts of time every day, but reasonable amounts of time, developing the courage to go further into your writing, to be honest. You know, one of my mantras is that you know, writing isn't really worth doing unless it's honest, personal writing. And the power of mantra, really, you know, that we use mantra, we use words, obviously, and that one of the things I've learned with yoga is the connection between words and the body. And to have that revealed for someone who writes and kind of reversed so that it's words coming out of the body rather than, so many writers just think they have a brain and that their writing comes purely from their brain. And I don't believe that at all.
Would you say it comes more from the heart or from?
I think it can come from all over your body. You know, I'm an absolute believer that emotion and memory are stored in different parts of the body. Yeah. And if you access those different parts of the body, then, you know, you release trapped memories, trapped emotions. And that can be very useful for your writing, for sure.
Like every kind of art, no? Also, or like shouldn't come from here. Yeah.
No, but the mythology of writing has been that, you know, you don't need to look after your body. Well, the 20th century mythology of writing is you don't need to look after your body as long as your brain works and your fingers to be able to type. That's all you need, you know. And more writers are turning around and saying, well, no, that's just doesn't work for me. And it's good because there are a lot of unhealthy habits that went alongside that mythology of writing, that you could be, you know, you could drink, you could just neglect your body, you could be unaware of your body, you could be purely cerebral. And that's only part of the story, you know. And as we know, our brains are affected by what goes on in our bodies anyway. It isn't just one-way traffic.
Correct. So how's the feedback of your students having taken the course? Were there any surprising outcomes they didn't expect from the course?
I think that most people are surprised at how effective it is.
That's good.
Yeah, exactly, which is just true. Yeah, well, don't forget they've chosen the course in the first place, so they're interested. And like I say, I only really get complimentary comments from people that they're surprised at how effective it is. But there's no mystery for me. I wouldn't say that's something that I'm brilliant at, because, you know, my course is built on lessons I've learned from other people who went before me, like all forms of yoga teaching. So it's not surprising it works. But I think the most interesting thing is when I've actually demonstrated yoga for writers, to writers, artists, and musicians who have assumptions about yoga and who are critical of yoga and are not pro-yoga at all, who at the very simplest level have told me they've got an enormous amount out of just pure breath work or rolling their heads, relaxing their necks, you know, opening up their chests, opening up their hearts, and have been surprised at A, how relaxing it can be, or B, how energizing it can be, and what the effect that has on their writing.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
So I've never had anything really negative, no.
Good. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Is there anything you would like to add today, David?
No, that's been great. Thanks. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. And I hope you have, and I hope your listeners and your audience has too, your viewers.
Our viewers today. Yeah, thank you so much, David, for being here, for sharing your insights. And also thank you so much for you, viewers or listeners, being with us and commenting. And what is the bottom line of today? I think, as we said, or the yoga, there was never one yoga in history. Yoga has always changed and has been changing, and it continues to change. There was a big change in the recent year, not just in yoga, but for the world due to global circumstances. But I believe for something better. I truly believe. And we've talked about the yoga industry, and I recently wrote in one blog myself that we are part of this industry, though some don't like it to hear, but I say I'm part of this industry, but so I define it, I can define it. So whatever, if you're not d'accord with something, it's in our hands to change that. So let's not forget that. So thank you so much. Muchas gracias.
My pleasure.
Thank you, David.
Okay.